One unhappy aspect of Anglo-American culture right now is the continual attack on government that we see coming from virtually every quarter. And it's become an article of faith that whoever you are, whatever your occupation, whatever you know, you can with impunity launch any attack on our government. And not have to worry about being called on it. Now, it's truly an antisocial attitude. Now, how is this reconciled with good sense? We realize that we're basically social beings, and yet this antisocial type of attack is okay. Why? Well, one distinction people try to make, and I think it's a false distinction, they pretend that there's a difference, that they are for society. They're not antisocial, they're just anti-government. They pretend there's a difference between, that you can divide society and government in that way. And that is truly a false distinction. It's unreal. Government is merely the organized expression of society. Neither one exists without the other in any but a potential lifeboat situation or some small tribal situation. They go together. Now, good government is potentially one of the highest expressions of society, and nowhere does man exist as an individual. Nowhere do you find man living alone as an individual. I'm going to say it one more time for a reason. No place and no time do you find mankind living alone as an individual. We are social beings. I've repeated that, said it 3 times for a reason, which I'll tell any of you privately if you like. An attack on government is an attack on society, is an attack against humanity. Who does it serve? We found this disease has its roots, we think, we're open to correction on it if people know more about it. We think it has its roots in economics, most notably in Adam Smith, the father of economics himself. So let's examine what he was up to. What our research has found is that the modern attack on government begins in Adam Smith's attempt to keep England's monetary power held by the private Bank of England. Smith strongly supported the Bank of England. He obscured its private ownership. He likened it to a great engine of state. And the evidence that we find is right there in the Wealth of Nations. It looks to me like smoking gun type evidence. It was in response to people like Bishop George Berkeley, and who came before Smith by 35, 40 years, or the ideas brought up by Ricardo, who came after a bit. And these ideas were that the Bank of England, properly constituted, would be within the British government. And here's what Smith said. It's fascinating to find his attacks connected with his desire to support the Bank of England. He wrote, "A revenue of this kind," first he translates the question, should the money power be in the government? He translates it into an idea about revenue, which is not really the picture. It's a question of power and control. But he says, "A revenue of this kind has even, by some people, thought not below the attention of so great an empire as that of Great Britain. But whether such a government as that of England, which, whatever may be its virtues, has never been famous for good economy, which in time of peace has generally conducted itself with the slothful and negligent profusion that is perhaps natural to monarchies, and in time of war has constantly acted with all the thoughtless extravagance that democracies are apt to fall into, could be safely trusted with the management of such a project, must at least be a good deal more doubtful." Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations, page 358, Great Books Collection. Great Books Collection is in more libraries than most of the particular editions of those books, so it's easy to find. His insulting attacks on the English government is remarkable for a man of letters. And I think it marks the modern beginning of a relentless attack on society, the smearing of its organizational form, government, the single organization potentially capable of blocking plutocracy's encroachments against the population, of standing up to the Enrons of the world. Smith inadvertently illuminates the major purpose of the attack: to keep the money power in private hands. And every day we see examples of how this disease has reached epidemic proportions in America. I don't think it's as bad in England, but our English friends can tell us. It spread from Hayek and Ayn Rand to their intellectual heir Rush Limbaugh and his propaganda radio. It's not entertainment. It's gone way beyond politics, and for a long time has resided, I think, actually in treason. Now, what's the background to Smith's attack? We used to think that this was William III of Orange, but our English friends have informed me that his real name is Billy. So we reworded our slide. When William III of Orange took over England in 1688, very soon the Bank of England was set up in 1694, and the private ownership of it was obscured, and those behind the bank obscured the real source of the bank's power, which was its legal privilege. Its notes were accepted in payments to the government. It had recovered the lost science of money, but for the private benefit of a small group, not the whole nation. Privately issued money produced harmful results immediately: 120 years of near continuous warfare, which spawned an unpayable national debt, which put pressure on landlords to come up with the taxes to pay the interest on the debt, leading to such atrocities as the Irish potato famine. Before that time, when a nation's money system was used for taxation, the revenue generally aided the society, at least in terms of what a king or a republic thought was good for the society. But private monies, like the Bank of England, concentrated society's resources into just a few hands, crippling the possibility for government to function properly, leading to a growing contempt of government. People behind the Bank of England were thought to be William Patterson, but and Patterson had proposed 5 different plans for the Bank of England. Some 60 or 70 plans had been put forward for a bank. The real power behind the bank was always Charles Montague, the Montague family of importance in England, right from the 1060s, right from William the Conqueror's time. And their name, Montague, comes after the name of the mountain that their castle was on. It was an acute mountain, Mount Acute. Now, half of the problem is the failure of economics from Adam Smith to the present to properly define money. It's still argued whether the nature of money is a concrete power embodied in commodity like gold, or whether it's a credit, debit issued by private banks. Does its value come from the material in which it's made, or is it, as we've concluded, an abstract legal institution of society, an abstract institution of the law that has value in exchanges thanks to a functioning society and the sponsorship of government? If you doubt that this is still a question, there's legislation, I believe, or close to it, to go back onto a gold standard in Washington. We've got a major movie that's just come up by a great movie guy by the name of Aaron Russo, who we're going to see him at our beach party tomorrow, I believe, if he shows up, where he hits exactly on the problem, the Federal Reserve System. He hits exactly on the importance of the monetary problem as being the central issue of our time. And then when he gets to the solution is gold. Well, we know better. We've been through that. We know that it's been a fiction, and we know where it leads. The other half of the problem is the mythology of money. That what a lot of people think they know about money just isn't so, and that's the case that I've just been describing. You have a body of plausible sounding but misleading, even false ideas, repeated century after century by powerful interests, now passes for monetary wisdom. A large part of this mythology is the view that government has been the main abuser of money system, that governments cannot handle the problem, and government money systems inevitably cause inflation. This deeply entrenched viewpoint assumes that society has had better experience with privately controlled money than with government-issued money. Well, we'll examine the evidence of that quickly behind that dominant viewpoint. And I think you'll all agree that any such beliefs should rest on factual information. And that if the facts demonstrate something else, that then you have to reevaluate that long-standing prejudice against government. Berkeley, Anglican bishop of Coit, Ireland, he was one of the people who put forward good ideas about money in 1735 in England. And his position was that a central bank has advantages if it's government-owned, but not if it's a private organization. Aristotle, in the 4th century BC, gave us the reconstituted, he set forward what we call the science of money, still valid today. All goods must therefore be measured by some one thing. Now this unit is in truth demand, which holds all things together. But money has become by convention a representative of demand, and this is why it has a name, nomisma. And here's the key phrase that summarizes the whole thing: because it exists not by nature, but by law or binding custom, the word for which in Greek was nomos. And it's in our power to change it and make it useless. What he's done, he's distinguished between wealth and money. Wealth is tangible. Money is abstract. Money does not come out of the ground like gold or silver. It's not out of nature. It's not from a farm. It's an abstract legal power. So he's identified it as a creature of the law, not a commodity, and that distinction is crucial. In this battle, in the battle for the control of money, we find that the battle lines have been between publicly created money and privately created money. That's been the battle line, at least to Aristotle. In Aristotle's time, his word for money, nomisma, is not found in Greek texts. It's in Aristotle in the 4th century BC. To find it before that, you have to go back over 100 years for Herodotus, where the term nomisma is used again. And one professor has put forward the idea that this concept of money was suppressed by the old boy network, oligarchic network that preferred to trade on the basis of what they did for each other and their debts between each other. And they reacted against the nomisma, which is created by the newer, more democratic polis organization in Greece. And so that there was that, we have evidence of that fight between private and public all the way back to Aristotle, and possibly even earlier than that in Sparta. Now, what Adam Smith did in The Wealth of Nations, he took a giant leap backward and obliterated any concept of money in the law. Here's how this is the best definition you'll find of money in Adam Smith. It's not quite sufficient, but that's what you'll find there. By the money price of goods, I understand always a quantity of pure gold or silver for which they're sold without any regard to denomination of the coin. The denomination of the coin is what sets the money aside legally. The difference between a $5 bill and a $50 bill is the stamp, the denomination, the legal value. He's obliterating the concept of money in the law. Now, this private versus public battle for money continues throughout history to this day. And despite the prejudice against government, the historical record actually shows publicly controlled money functions better than privately controlled money. It's a very important historical basis for that. Furthermore, it shows that the concept of money, how you define it, determines whether the system is going to be publicly or privately controlled. Define money as wealth. Who will control it? The wealthy. Define it as gold and silver. They've got the gold and silver. That's pretty much what happened, in fact, in the United States, when the first Bank of the United States, private bank of the United States was formed. Define money as a bank credit, as we now do, and what will happen? Who will control? The banking system that issues these credits will control. Define money properly as an abstract legal power, and the society has a chance to control it. It's not guaranteed, but at least there's a chance to control it. So there's a great deal at stake in how a society defines its money system. Unfortunately, the mythology of money has obscured this science and served to keep the money power in private hands most of the time. Here's what happened. The science of money is put forward logically, historically, showing that seigniorage, the profit of issuing money and the control of it, more importantly, the power derived from it, clearly belongs to the nation, not to private banks. A plutocracy counters with a mythology, the slur that government, the organized expression of your society, our society, can't handle it. Since Adam Smith, a 3-century campaign raises the fear of inflation and abuse under government money, even though the evidence shows the opposite. In this campaign, they are still advertising to 600 to 700-year-old cases of monarchs debasing their coinage. But they never ever give the context that this occurred in 1200 AD and around that period of time with the fall of Constantinople, which had held the monetary power throughout Europe up till then. And so European monetary order was in total disarray. Also not mentioned is much of the kingly alterations were a necessary form of taxation, and not mentioned is that the republics fared much better than monarchies did, and finally, they don't discuss the greater monetary problems caused by private bankers during those times. Now, as an island community, the Brits and our friends from England, from Britain, Great Britain, can confirm this. They had monetary advantages over the continent. Their kings did pretty well on the money question, despite the idea that kings couldn't handle money. 1346, in 1346, Parliament tried to get control over the money system, was refused. 1414, Parliament tried to get at least a veto power on money matters, again refused. Breckinridge noted in Legal Tender, her book, why did Parliament not succeed in its attempt to assume the coinage power? One reason was that Parliament had no other remedy to propose, no other line of conduct to suggest than that pursued by the Crown. Now, despite the prejudices, and I found some surprise at this even when I spoke in England in 2004, the English king's long-standing monetary prerogative was used responsibly. Shaw tells us in his book, History of Currency, 1896, he could identify only one case in all of English monarchical history, one case of abuse. Just one, and it was Henry VIII, 1545 to 1546 is the, quote, is the only one on record. The instance of debasement, 1545 to 46 under Henry VIII, 2 years, is the only one on record in English currency history, he wrote, and it amounted to a grand total of 15%. That's it. What's the big deal? British kings did well. Considering more recent times, conservative journalist, Henry Hazlitt, sort of epitomizes this prejudice and this error, the reigning error, what I call the reigning error about money. In his introduction to Andrew Dixon White's essay, Fiat Money in France, we get a classic attack on government money. And here's what he wrote. Quote, the world has failed to learn the lesson of the assignats. He's writing about the French currency. Perhaps the study of the other great inflations, of John Law's experiments with credit in France, of the history of our own continental currency, of the greenbacks of our Civil War, or the great German inflation that culminated in 1923, would help to underscore and impress that lesson. Must we from this appalling and repeated record draw once more the despairing conclusion that the only thing man learns from history is that man learns nothing from history? And the answer to Henry Hazlitt is no, Henry, that's not the lesson. He actually believed that history backed up his viewpoint. And he believed it because he heard it 100 times or more, and it comes through from the Austrian economists. He predates the modern libertarians a bit. Well, let's take an actual look at what Henry Hazlitt is referring to here. Let's start with the Continental currency, all right? Continental currency, begun in May 1775, became the lifeblood of the American Revolution. 200 million were authorized. Exactly 200 million were printed, exactly. This was done at a time when the Continental Congress had no power to issue money. They had no power to tax. They had no police power, and still they were able to do this. Now, this currency, the Continentals, gave us a nation. It's true that it eventually became worthless, but it wasn't because of our Congress. The Brits began to counterfeit it when they took over New York. Well, even before they took over New York, they had ships in New York Harbor with printing presses on it, just pumping out currency day and night, constantly. And it was relatively easy. That was its main problem, was easy to counterfeit. This shows an advertisement that appeared in the local newspaper in New York, advertising the sale of Continental currency for the price of the paper. Come to the coffee house, where is it? Inquire for QED at the coffee house from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. during the present month. Okay, they did business in coffee houses back then. We were like stock exchanges at times. So we don't know how many billion they printed. When my English friend, my UK friends brought me over to speak to members of the House of Commons and some lords and bishops and the people who were interested in monetary reform, I related this to them. They've forgotten it, and I did ask them to, if they ever find out how many they printed, they should let us know for the record. Well, for example, here's what happened. General Clinton complains to Lord Germain, the experiments suggested by your lordship have been tried. No assistance that could be drawn from the power of gold or the arts of counterfeiting have been left untried, but still the currency has not failed. Okay, it carried us over 5.5 years of warfare against the world's greatest power, military power, to within 6 months of final victory. And Tom Paine, America's greatest son, father of the revolution, called the Continental currency a cornerstone of the revolution. And here's what he said about it. Every stone that has carried us over this bridge has a claim on our esteem, but this was the cornerstone. And then he addresses an obvious complaint about the currency. But to suppose, as some did, that at the end of the war it was going to grow into gold or silver, was to suppose that we were going to get 200 million for going to war instead of paying the cost of carrying the war on. Had we followed the ideas of Adam Smith, or the Austrian School of Economics, or the libertarians, who have adopted so many of the Austrian school's positions because of Ayn Rand's influence in the formation of the Libertarian Party. Had we followed those ideas, never forget, there could not have been a United States of America. It would never come into existence. If we follow those ideas now, we're not going to have that long of an existence to go. Unfortunately, thanks to the present administration, there are more and more people who would look forward to such a demise. Our currencies, our colonial currencies, were issued responsibly. The first one revolutionized life in the colonies. It was out of Massachusetts, 1690. It was the first modern paper currency in the West. And it was not a promise to pay gold. It was not a promise to pay anything. It was a promise to receive back. That's what this says. The Treasury of Massachusetts will receive back in payment this paper slip for a specific amount. That turned life around in the colonies. Up till then, more people were going back to England than were coming here. This changed everything. The other colonies immediately began to copy it. New Jersey's here. Ben Franklin started up a currency, or helped start up a Pennsylvania currency. In all the history of the colonial currencies, you do not, and there's at least 150 of them, different issues, you don't find overissuing of money. You find that they never issued more money than their legislature authorized. Now, their legislature may have authorized more than they should have at times. They were learning. It was a learning process of how to issue money. But the record is virtually perfect. We have one case of fraud in Virginia that was uncovered, and that was where a guy was supposed to be destroying the old currency as new currency was being printed, and instead of destroying it, he was giving it away to his friends, being a big shot with the currency. But that's the only case we have, and whenever I hear cases of fraud, it's that same case. Same was true here. Oh, well, I'm going to go to Ben Franklin first. I'm sorry. Okay, this is after the first bank of the United States, private bank, was brought down and ended, private central bank. The government, the U.S. government, created its first paper money. Prior to that, it was the Continental Congress or the colonies. This is the first U.S. money, and it was brought out to make up for the withdrawal of the first bank of the United States in 1811, I guess. Yeah, 1891 to 11, right, 20 years. 65 million of it was authorized over a period of years. 37 million was actually issued. It's a matter of record. So it's not following the formula that we're told, let the government create money and they're going to overissue, they're going to go wild. It has not happened that way. The kinds of problems that we have with currency generally come from privately controlled banks. Ben Franklin summed it up. Experience, more prevalent than all the logic in the world, has fully convinced us all that paper money has been and is now of the greatest advantages to the country. So you can't have a guy like Franklin saying that and continue to have this this reigning error about money out there. So what do? The Austrians attacked Franklin viciously. They tell us that Franklin said that because he's a printer, and he's going to earn money on printing the currency. They seriously tell us that. And so whenever I speak to a group that has Austrians in the audience, I offer them the opportunity to apologize on behalf of the Austrian School of Economics for this slur. And I'll let you know if we ever get a taker on that. It hasn't happened yet. John Law. The second case that Henry Hazlitt brings up. the experience with John Law, 1720s in France. And he really did, over not too much time, wreck the entire French monetary system. However, it was set up as private companies. Despite his initial proposal that it be a government organization, the French insisted on doing it privately. And Law had an initial very big success, and from that point on, it became a race to try to raise the values of private companies. There's tremendous speculation going on. You've all seen this picture of the Rue Quincampoix in Paris, where they carried on the gambling all day and all night. And if it rained, they went into coffee houses. Anyway, the real lesson, and this occurred basically the same time that the South Sea scandal was occurring in England, another case of a private monetary problem. The real lesson for the French should have been not about paper money, but it's not a good idea to turn over your nation's money system to a professional gambler wanted for murder in his home country. Duh. The later assignats of the French were issued by the French government, but they were issued in a situation that was already totally destroyed, where the aristocracy had wrecked the country to the point that the people insisted on the guillotine for most of them. And what we hear about it has been so twisted by Andrew Dixon White's book, Fiat Money in France, that I have to describe this to you so you understand how they've done this. All right? In the modern propaganda battle for control over money, size, money power, the assignats described in White's Fiat Money in France has been an important propaganda weapon against government money. Few people realize that his purpose, writing in 1876 during the battles over the American greenbacks, was an attack on government money, and it was over the greenbacks, which was almost a century after the assignats were actually issued. White, whose inherited fortune arose from banking, used very eloquently several rhetorical methods to attack the greenbacks. But Hazlitt's introduction, that's what he was describing, White's book, his introduction to that book, he presents White's essay as objective history on France, not as a political tract on the greenbacks. Since a direct examination of the greenbacks and their results would defeat White's purpose, instead he argued from analogy, asserting that what was true of France in this time of ruin had to be true of America as well, in relative calm. Right from its publication, White's book was exposed in a lengthy essay by Stephen Dillier, D-I-L-L-A-Y-E, who pointed out the purpose and faults of White's arguments, including omitting to inform his readers that the Swiss, and later the British, counterfeited far more assignats than the French ever created. So they did the same thing as to the Continental currency. These facts became documented for the record when the counterfeiters sued each other in English courts. And so it's a matter of court record about this counterfeit. Now, White's book has managed to be kept continuously in print by conservative foundations, the latest being the Cato Institute. Dillier's important essay has been out of print for 125 years, but we have a copy and we'll make it available. Well, you might be thinking, no matter what Zarlenga says, there's still the German hyperinflation. That's all we need to know. You cannot let government handle your money system, right? I mean, look, we know, we hear about the wheelbarrows. We see the pictures of the currency being used for wallpaper. It's actually attractive as wallpaper. But here's what we don't hear. Was issued by a privately owned, privately controlled Reichsbank. All that currency occurred under that private situation. And the hyperinflation began a month after the total removal of all German government influence on the Reichsbank, at the insistence of the Allies, among whom was a banker from Chicago, who later got a big peace prize. I forget it. He was a vice president, then became vice president, and then his bank went under in the Great Depression. Finance Minister Schack wrote 2 books on the German hyperinflation. First one was Stabilization of the Mark in 1928. He didn't talk about this there. Only in his 67 book, you know, he's an older man, he's going to go, he wants to get the record, set the record straight and tell the truth. And that, there he describes, in his 67 book, The Magic of Money, he told the whole story. The German Reichsbank had been fully privatized at the insistence of the Allies in May of 23. Hyperinflation, there was going to be inflation. I mean, with those reparation payments and with all the problems of a defeated Germany, there was going to be inflation. But the real tremendous acceleration starts after this point, and this privately controlled, privately owned Reichsbank, this is what Schack was still angry about in 1967, which is why he described it. They financed the destruction of the mark by providing the funds for short selling the mark. They financed it, and so he wanted to get that into the record, and he finally did it. Now, it would be asking too much after 3 centuries of propaganda, or let's see, 1770, a couple of centuries of propaganda, for me to convince you with just these few examples. But I think you can already see a pattern emerging that these grand hyperinflations or grand problems created by government currency are not, the truth about them is not what's been represented to us. The last case that White talks about are the greenbacks. What about the greenbacks? All right, again, it does not stand scrutiny. Contemporary observers of the greenbacks called it the best money system we ever had, and up till that time, it was. Now, the greenbacks, again, they're not a promise to pay anything. They are the money. That little slip of paper, that's the money. 450 million were authorized. Guess how many were printed? 450 million, exactly. The big difference with the greenbacks was that they could not be counterfeited. You see the complex printing. They were never successfully counterfeited. They did not add to any national debt, because they're not a debt. So there were no interest payments to be paid on this money. This then constituted about 1/3 of all the circulating medium for a period of time, the 450 million. We're not talking about experiments. Ken Palmerton was upset that we referred to Guernsey as an experiment. I can understand that. I never realized you had 600 years of history behind it, or was it 400? Anyway. This was not an experiment either. We're not promoting some brand new idea. We can go all the way back to Aristotle for what we're promoting and what we're advocating. Now, but still, thanks to 100 years of misreporting and propaganda, the image of the greenbacks that comes down to us is inflated or worthless paper money. In fact, it eventually exchanged 1-for-1 with gold, which may not have, I don't think was really a good idea, but that's what happened. Here's what happened to the greenback value in terms of gold, not in terms of commodity, but in terms of gold. So you had the war. Also important to realize, before the war, price of gold, the price of commodities had dropped dramatically. So they were already, commodities were depressed before the war. Now this is the price of gold in greenbacks. And most economists don't know much about the greenbacks. That what they tell you is, well, it went to 36 cents against gold. And that's true. It went to 36 cents against gold for maybe a week or whatever period of time. But then it adjusted. It adjusted. The gold market closed for a period of time after the war started. If you were to chart commodities here, and a guy by the name of Mitchell did that, he had to create price indexes. Commodities did something like that. In other words, gold went up against other commodities also. At this point in time, they exchanged 1 for 1. Why? What happened here? Some economists I've talked to said, well, the reason that it kept its value was that the law said that it would have to be exchanged for gold. Well, that law was 1876, is when that law got passed. And something here, and it was touch and go, and it was reversible after they passed it. They tried to reverse it. That could not cause this here. What happened here was very simple. On this date, Congress set the limit at 450 million. That's it. At that point in time, value of the greenback starts increasing because they knew it was limited. All right. There was inflation, but you have to remember 13% of the population is involved in warfare. How many? 625,000 Americans died in the Civil War. I think 1.5 million injuries. And also consider what they were used for. This is what the greenbacks were used for. And this is one of the reasons that inflation is connected with government money, because it's often been in times of war that the government has had to do this, or has been allowed to to control the money system, whether it was a Revolutionary War or the Civil War. You put money into this type of thing, it will be inflationary. You're killing, you're destroying. Consider, what if? What if it had been used to build canals, roads, buildings, infrastructure? It would have been a totally different situation. And that's what our American Monetary Act, which we're going to discuss tomorrow in some detail, does propose. Now, here's the connection here, further defining this connection between war and inflation and government money. In this case, we're going to come into the modern time. Also regarding the greenbacks, it's been noted that it's clear that inflation would have occurred even without the greenback issue. The threat of inflation was more effectively curbed in the Civil War than during the First World War, and as John Kenneth Galbraith has observed, it's remarkable that without rationing, price controls, or central banking, Chase could have managed the federal economy so well during the Civil War. And there's another factor here. For every dollar, of greenbacks that the government created, the banking system created $1.49. They magnified it. So if there's inflation there, that's part of it too, or if it came from currency expansion. The great lesson of the greenbacks is that in times of crisis and other times too, the nation has the power to do what's financially necessary through our government. We don't have to beg or borrow the money from private wealthy people. We don't have to tax the middle class out of existence to get the money. We can responsibly use the nation's sovereign monetary power far more than we've presently been allowed to realize. Again, it's not theoretical. It's been done. It's been done going back to Aristotle's time. We have it's been done in Roman times. Now, it's true, the South's Confederate currency did become worthless. But that's what happens to a paper currency if the society goes out of existence. And we recognize that. And but then think of what else you lose if your society goes out of existence. Currency is a small part of it. You lost the war. In more recent times, during warfare, banks, to assure their own survival in World War I, World War II, issued the money in large quantities. They knew the resulting production would be blown up or sunk or be useless, shot out of the sky, sunk to the bottom of the seas. We see this in what happened to Roosevelt during the Depression and with World War II. Federal Reserve System, founded in 1913. Within 20 years, the country is on its knees. The farms are out of business, farmers are broke, stuck with high debts and falling land prices, and taxes staying high. The banks are closed, factories are closed, people are out of work, hungry, angry. Roosevelt, facing this situation, tried to rebuild the money supply. Approximately a little bit over 100 billion was lost in stocks, bank failures, company failures in the Great Depression. Roosevelt initiated these programs, which are derided today as, when people are ridiculing, they call them the alphabet soup programs, for example. And it's because they have these initials such as WPA, Works Progress Administration, CWA, Civil Works, FERA. Okay. These are the amounts, total amounts spent in each of these from 1933 to 1940, the whole recovery, supposed recovery period, and it comes to a total of 15.51 billion. The source for this is an outstanding textbook on American financial history written by Studensky and Cruz. This is all documented there. I think our economist friends will confirm that these are good, solid people when they wrote carefully. So this is all documented. So he gets to rebuild only 15 billion out of 100 billion, and every time he's trying, and this is a remarkable thing when you're reading these histories of the period, including Milton Friedman's book, History of the U.S. Currency, such and such year to 1860, or 1865 to 19 something. Whenever Roosevelt tries to do something like this with one of these programs, tries to add to it, the economists start to scream, that would be inflationary. Now, they're in the middle of one of the worst deflations of certainly of the century, if not more, and their stock response, that would be inflationary. Keynes was an interesting guy. He knew better. But he basically represented the banking interests. And he faced this same problem because he couldn't do what he wanted to do because he had all these mistrained economists out there that were stopping him, and so he devised a theory that was complex enough to keep them busy for years, and they're still arguing about it as to what Keynes really meant, and finding inconsistencies, and probably because it is inconsistent. But his purpose was political, to be able to get the government to borrow money. He told Roosevelt in open letters to the New York Times, don't create the money, borrow it. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing. We've got it exactly. We have it quoted exactly in our book. And he told them, quote, trying to expand the money supply by creating more money is like trying to gain weight by opening your belt up. All right, cute, but false. So, what happened next was that Roosevelt had to go to war. And the attitude changed entirely. And this is the relationship between war, government, and inflation. The attitude became, you have no choice. If it's a war, you have no choice. Opposition can't stand up against it. You find a handful of people like Congressman Kucinich here who have the courage to vote against that type of proposal in the Congress. So everyone gets stampeded into that situation, and here's what happened with Roosevelt. July 1st, 1940, December 1941, 21 billion expenditures in excess of anything previously spent. National defense, accounted for 12 billion or 59%. 41 to 46, again, Studensky and Cruz, the only bank lending which showed an increase was that which constituted the financing of war. July 1st to 40 to 46, government was encouraged to spend 387 billion, which 95% was for the military. During that period, total of 44 billion in taxes were collected. The rest, 343 billion, was paid for by going into debt, according to Keynes' formula. Keynes was not a radical in any sense, except compared to some of those backward economists. So, the national debt, February 46, 279 billion, 31% of it was held by commercial banks. It can be considered as money that they created out of thin air. At the war's end, prices were at 105 based on 1926. Prices equal 100. Wartime price controls were lifted, prices rose to 169. Not such a big deal in terms of the kind of killing and expenditures that went on. In more recent times, okay, I already said that. We have not seen in modern times, in the Anglo-American world, instances where large amounts of money was created by government for peaceful purposes. We have not seen it. There are a few exceptions. One small exception, it's not really even a question of money creation, but to show what happens when money goes into infrastructure and why it's not inflationary. The Erie Canal was built, and it connected New York City to Buffalo, I think, was considered the Midwest at that time. And it drove the price of shipping per ton down from $114 a ton down to $9 per ton. That's the kind of thing that infrastructure can do. It makes everybody in the society more effective and more efficient. Makes all of our work more valuable. It adds value. When you add real value, you hold inflation down. And there's one more example from the 1960s, which I always ask the audience to tell me what it was, where the government was allowed to spend as much as it wanted on a non-warfare.
Non-warfare. Highways?
Well, 59, the Eisenhower Highway Program is one case, but that, I would argue that'd be a good case too, but I'm thinking of another one. Which? The space program. Remember in the 60s, NASA could get anything it wanted. All they had to do was ask for it. Kennedy had committed to go to the moon. NASA, they put together the best and the brightest, and anything they wanted, they got. And we didn't get any immediate benefit out of it except the publicity of going to the moon. But what did come out of it? That computer came out of it. Everything that our modern economy is based on came out of miniaturization needed to get that stuff into space, because it had to be tiny. And that was a tremendous, it built our present infrastructure. It took a little while, but it shows the power of, instead of directing money as at present into buying existing real estate structures, as was pointed out earlier by Michael, that 70% of the new money is going into real estate. That if you put that, I'm not even going to call it money at this point, put that power of society, it's the circulation of society. It's like blood, in a sense, to society. You put that into the right things, or even good things that you may not see the full benefit that's going to come out of it eventually, but it's going to be there. If you put it into this other stuff, yes, you're going to have inflation, and we have it now. That's what's going on right now. We've got a growing inflation. We've got the CRB index approached its old highs at 380. Nobody even knows that it was up there. You can't find charts on that. I happen to have private charts from many years back. that was a danger point. It was also a stopping point. So maybe things are going to be held back here. Maybe the markets are starting to discount a political victory for the Democratic Party, which would put a stop to so much of the nonsense, even though we may not be, you know, a lot of people are saying, you know, they have, not enough Democrats are out there fighting. Well, ours is. So, ours, I'm sorry. Anyway, warfare became associated with getting the economy moving. It wasn't the warfare, it was the accompanying monetary and production activity that did it. In short, the plutocracy's inflation theme is the big lie. You can't allow this mythology to dictate your actions. And I'm going to close with several people have mentioned Henry George, and I'm going to mention him, but I caution you, do not follow Henry George's political methods. He had some very good ideas, but on the political side, he said, I care not how men vote, I care how they think. All right, so that leaves politics. Politics and Henry George, no. But here's what he said that's very, I think, has a much deeper and constant truth. Following Dr. Buckle's lead, George identified the false axiom on which Smith's entire wealth of nations is based. Quote, Buckle's understanding of political economy, they used to call it political economy, then they changed it to economics to remove the idea of politics. Buckle's understanding of political economy was that it eliminated every other feeling than selfishness, wherein Smith generalizes the laws of wealth, not from the phenomena of wealth, not from statistical statements. I'll get back to that. Oh. The selfishness here, okay. Not from the phenomena of selfishness. Yeah. Whereas Smith generalizes the laws of wealth, not from the phenomena of wealth, nor from statistical statements, but from the phenomena of selfishness, thus making a deductive application of one set of mental principles to the whole set of economical facts. He everywhere assumes that the great moving power of all men, all interests, all classes, in all ages and in all countries is selfishness. Indeed, Adam Smith will hardly admit common humanity to his theory of motives. Well, consider the negative impact of this on humanity. If you define man in that base manner, then you're going to create your laws based on that wrong-headed idea. You're going to create rewards and punishments based on that bad idea. And you will create the kind of what Henry George called a monster rather than man. This is a de-evolutionary process. It's been going on in the Anglo-American world for at least since Adam Smith, encouraging a lower form of humanity for well over 2 centuries. There were great English writers, great British writers, novelists like Charles Dickens, or great philosophers like Bishop Berkeley. They slowed it down, they didn't stop it. And Henry George saw exactly where it would lead, nor can we abstract from man all but selfish qualities in order to make him what is called economic man without getting what is really a monster, not a man. And Henry George substituted a different concept for this destructive selfishness error. It's not selfishness that enriches the annals of every people with heroes and saints. That turned Buddha's back to his royal home, or bade Joan of Arc to lift the sword from the altar that held the 300 in the pass at Thermopylae, or gathered into Winkelried's bosom the sheaf of spears. That's the Swiss fellow that Ben Giesen told us about yesterday. Call it religion, patriotism, or the love of God. Give it what name you will, there's yet a force which overcomes and drives out selfishness, a force which is the electricity of the moral universe, a force beside which all others are weak. I call this force destiny toward human nature, a higher, nobler nature than we generally manifest. And this force of forces that now goes to waste or assumes perverted forms, we can use for the strengthening and building up and ennobling of society. I think perhaps that's a good place to stop. George also wrote some good things on why we shouldn't be so worried about government, and I'm happy to go into any of that in a question period if you like. But let's open it up if there are any questions at this point. Would someone carry this mic? Would you carry the mic around? Yeah.
Did I understand you correctly when you gave the ratio of bank credit to greenbacks as 1.49 to 1?
$1.49 every dollar that the government created. Well, to every dollar that the government created, the banking system created $1.49. Yeah, that's well documented.
How did you come up with that? Is that too esoteric for this late in the day?
Pardon?
I said, how did you come up with it? Or
It's
is that
from,
too esoteric for this late in the day?